pai ki ngā tangataka tō hanga e te atua he nākau hau, ki roto, ki tēnā mātou. Whakatongia te wairua tapu hei āwhina, hei sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied, Madam Chair, this morning. He tohu I a mātou. Hei ako hoki I ngā mahi mō tēnei rā. Amene.
Amene.
Amen.
Kia ora, Councillor Morris. We have got Mea Mahei, Councillor Rolleston and Councillor Schuler online in Rotorua, and Councillor Hotapu is online until about 10:30. Otherwise, we are all... Oh, and Rick, I believe, is on his way. So we'll have maybe apology for lateness. Thank you. So the business today is we are looking at the 26-27 annual plan capital and levels of service and employee costs and consulting. We have got an agenda which runs through 6 different points. Welcome to the staff who are attending today, and thank you to those who have helped with the preparation. Part of this discussion will be in public excluded, but there is no decisions required in this workshop. So we can get started on the introduction, context and overview of the Balancing Act consideration. Over to you, Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, by way of very short introduction, in December last year, we had a council meeting where we presented at that stage the budget for the annual plan as it was in our books and had been built up. At that stage, we were sitting at a rate increase of somewhere in the order of 13%, and so there was a discussion with council about the inclusion of or exclusion of our water costs and charges as part of that. There was also some direction provided by council that staff were required to report back on options for a 7.5 or 7 to 8% rate increase and the impact that would likely have across the various levels of service, impact on organisation, and the opportunity to perhaps use some other accounting adjustments, particularly around interest costs and charges and other such things. So since then, there's been a number of meetings, I think, held by councillors. Staff have been working away, and today's really an opportunity to present back to you what it looks like to achieve a 7.5% budget. We're not quite there. There's still some work to be done, and really the purpose of today is to have a conversation about how we might achieve that or what adjustments we might need to make to the budget to be able to present something to you formally to adopt as a draft for consultation. So Catherine, Susan and Craig have been beavering away furiously behind the scenes and are really in a position to be able to talk to that in detail.
Thanks, Marty, and through the chair. This opening slide, which has both context and the Balancing Act on it, which I think is on screen.
Can we have it on, please?
It's coming back on screen. There we go. Marty's covered some of the context, but probably the 2 other points to make is we are starting to lean into the new LTP at the same time as setting this annual plan. So there's a bit of overlap in the thought processes, and obviously one is a 1-year forward view and one's a 10-year forward view, but we probably need to be cognizant of that pending work. And that will be, as everyone knows, historically a significant process, and there'll be a series of workshops with elected members coming up in Q2 of this calendar year, and other engagements and discussions with stakeholders across Q3 and Q4 of this year. So that's a significant process. There's context around the proposed rates cap reform. I think this council's one of 18 that was invited to make submissions, and I think all 18 are opposing it, is my understanding. So there's a strong backlash, you might say, to that proposal. And that's context, I think, because this may be the only year in which councils are relatively unfettered in the setting of their rates increase, if this does become part of the regime going forward. And the other thing to consider and factor into the thinking is, of course, the various impacts that have emerged from the landslide event. So that is something that I think does now need to be considered and included. So that's some contextual items to build out what Marty said. I'm a fan of visual one-pagers, and so Catherine and I built this as a conceptual framework to think about the trade-offs and balancing that occurs through this process. So just to stand back before we get into the detail and the numbers, and to think about internal versus external, if you like. And so on the left, internally, we have to think about the impact of changes to the organisation's culture, how it might impact on the approach to good health and safety processes, customer satisfaction, importantly, risk appetite. I understand this council has recently worked through its appetite and its position on risk, and that is very much a factor in all of this, because changes sometimes do alter the risk profile. Efficient operational delivery and support services, that's in some ways the key internally, I think, to get that right. And I think there was obviously a significant reset with 104.7 FTEs removed in 2025 and other changes that resulted in a circa $39 million benefit. But in fact, efficiency and targeting good value for money outcomes is a continuous process, so we want to build that into this annual plan as well. And then, because debt plays a significant role in obviously the structure of the balance sheet, but also the costs of the organisation, optimising that is really important and actually quite challenging. And you could almost add, I think, the water's transition to that list at the moment as well as a very significant one-off project to be navigated. And then on the other side, of course, you're thinking about how services are delivered and how assets are managed in support of those services. And that takes you to a place of considering what services should be provided to citizens and the communities, and at what level, and that's one of the topics today. The management of projects and, thank you, and the reality that there is a big pipeline here at Tauranga City Council, and there are some practical and commercial overlays that mean target levels may not be able to be delivered to the extent conceivable or feasible in any given year, which we'll work through as well today. The role that user fees and charges play and other charges, wastewater and the stormwater targeted rate. So everybody is, around the country, the 70 or so councils, everybody is striving to balance, to find that magic place around balancing these internal and external factors. And that's really, I guess, the task of us collectively today, is to see if we can get that balance right. And And that really leads into the topics that follow for the rest of this workshop. And I'm happy to pause there. I wanted to start conceptually away from the numbers, and then of course we can jump into those numbers and look at how they might play out. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Thanks, Craig. I will start. Can we have it back, please? So an interesting comment we had at the town hall event we had at the historic village was that when we presented the operating costs of this organisation, which are about 500 million, one of the lines, I think, on a slide that Marty, you put up, said support services 22 million, and a nurse in the audience, one of our people, said, I'm a nurse and I didn't realise that we were putting that much money into supporting Tauranga. And there was a bit of a scrambling, and we realised that actually 22 million was to support this organisation in allocated costs. And to me, it was just something that we don't look hard enough at. And I think I'm not sure where are those things on this chart. I see on the external options we have OPEX but only levels of service. But where are the nice to haves that we have as the organisation? Or are you saying that anything we take out of that impacts the culture?
Yeah, so it's picked up in bullet 5 on the left-hand side under both operational delivery and support services, that topic.
But are you saying on internal options that we currently have efficient operational delivery, or is that what we're striving for?
I think the way I framed
in
it...
your first 2 weeks.
Well, it's now week 3, so life's good.
Sorry.
You know, as I mentioned, it's a continuous process, so you're never at the optimal point because the environment's dynamic. So, and therefore, in our assessment, every annual plan should be challenging in testing that question: how efficient are both the operational delivery services and the support services as well. So, and as I said, I think it's an inquiry, and it forms a part of each annual plan going forward, and of course the long-term plan also.
So, sorry, I'm going to carry on. So a question, we talk a lot about the ability to reduce level of service to our people. I would look at the allocated costs and quite a lot of even our front-facing departments and say that there's a level of service to this organisation internally, right? So whatever finance or HR or digital or the executive office or the print room, those are levels of service into the TCC operating. When do we look at those level of service in as much detail as we've got, like a 10-page worksheet we've been asked to go through for the levels of service we put out to our people? When are we looking at the level of service that our internal teams provide to TCC?
Well, that was precisely the purpose of the reset. And through that process, essentially 100 of those types of roles were funded roles, were, if you like, removed from the organisation. So there comes a point where all of those factors need to be taken into account as part of decision making, and not one of those bullet points, in my view, will solve the issues that we're trying to address. And so as we go forward and make decisions, there needs to be a balanced approach about there is a cause and effect, or an effect and a cause to whatever we do. And so if we were to focus on one or two of those bullet points, it would likely have an impact on the rest of the operation, the organisation, the risk, the safety, the efficiency. And so I think what you've got there, in my view, is a smorgasbord of conceptual things that we need to think about as part of our decision-making process.
And I'm going to go to the headcount schedule that we received that said at 30th of June 2025, we had 1143 FTEs, excluding city ops, not taking into account capitalised. 1143. 31st of December, 1164. And we talk about 100 and something roles, but I think 45 of those were vacancies. So I'm needing to see the actual dollar saving from the reset continue and continue to continue.
Madam Chair, that's an agenda item later.
I know, but our CEO raised that we had taken out 106 roles, and I think it was also raised, but a lot of those were vacancies, and it's a much easier task in an organisation to take out the vacancies, and if we were operating without those vacancies and we continue to do so, it's just, I think we have to be, our people have said we're not being transparent enough, so let's be transparent. When we talk about taking out roles, let's say, but 44 of those were vacant, for example.
Yes, and I'll speak to that. And so from October 2024, essentially we had a recruiting freeze other than for critical roles. So for a period of at least 9 months, we weren't recruiting, and we were carrying and accumulating vacancies. At some point, decisions were made by both staff and the governance at the time that those roles were deemed needed and necessary for the organisation. Those roles no longer exist.
I'm afraid the numbers that I've got on the spreadsheet in front of me, that at June 24 we had 1137 and at June 25 1143 FTEs. So I'm just struggling with that.
Madam Chair, if we get the opportunity, and we will later, to go into a non-public forum, I'll just share with Council, I guess, some of the implications or possible implications for downsizing an organisation and the risks that actually doing that to the level that we've done may pose. So I just raise that this is a consideration, and I think you'll find there on internal options it's raised.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, just seeing we're talking about that, it'd be good to have like a standardised format always of getting regular updates around the staffing situation, because it is something which keeps coming back. And there is one spreadsheet which I've only just seen for the first time in the last day, which seems a much clearer way of laying it out, where it does get into the vacancies as well with a column for that. And I just think that would, part of the issue here is we talk in different languages almost, that sometimes we're talking including vacancies, sometimes excluding. And when you look at the difference in the vacancies, I can see why the Deputy Mayor is making that point, because we sort of lost a certain number of staff, but then there have been minus 92 vacancies in the last 6-month period, which means plus that number of FTEs working here, presumably, if I understand that minus 92 vacancies, I presume that just means plus 92 non-vacancies. So I think that's where it'd be really helpful just to constantly get that clear messaging so we can track it as we're going, because the numbers are going up, and that's what we see, and that's where the bottom line is for the money. So to hear the different narrative is really confusing when the spreadsheet says it's going up, the costs say it's going up, and to sort of hear it's not going up, kind of, I haven't figured out how it's not going up.
We have our Manager of People and Capability here, who I think probably for the last 12 months has been, I feel like, overseeing the furnishing of reports on this. And so, Jan, are you in a position to speak to this?
Morning, everybody. Look, it's a snapshot in time. With any data that you receive, there are things moving. There are some departments that we are moving people from one team to another. So, you'll see one team is dropping, but another team is increasing. At the same time, we also did another tranche of city operations staff that came in, so there will be, while the numbers were going down, then they went up again at a certain point when we took on another, 50 city operations staff from our in-housing program. So the numbers will constantly be moving, and I guess in terms of the, annual plan reporting doesn't include, we don't report on the vacancies. It's factual information of FTEs at that point in time. So it is very challenging. But in terms of our corporate staffing numbers, they are going down if you are excluding the, sort of increased operational staff.
Okay, I'm going to move on because we are talking about headcount later, but can we just be very clear when, as Councillor Crowther says, let's make sure we want to be transparent. When we talk numbers, let's make sure we are talking off the same spreadsheet. And Jan, thank you for the spreadsheet you've given the working group, which we've all now got. And we want that on a quarterly basis, and that's the numbers we need to be talking from. Sorry, Craig, back to you.
Thank you. I was thinking myself quarterly would be appropriate to update elected members, so very happy to support that. And we will make sure it's a consistent format so that nobody gets confused. So
we like the format we've now got, finally. Thank
Great.
you.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll pass to Catherine at this point, and with your permission, Madam Chair, we'll move to agenda item 2, and at which point lots of numbers will start to appear. Catherine, over to you.
We sent out yesterday morning a little PowerPoint on achieving the 7.5%. I've revised the table, this table presentation also forms part of the logical flow for the 10th of February Council report. So it's worthwhile to spend a bit of time on this, even though it looks, a table of numbers. There's a story behind it. So I'd like to talk through the kind of journey to get to those 7.5% options through the table initially, and answer any questions on that. And then we have material on, hypothetically, there had been some questions about what does that do for different rate categories. So we've got a slide on that that's based on because we haven't got to the 7.5% yet, it's based on an indicative rate, but it enables you to see the impacts on the community. So I've given out a bigger table version of that, which is in black and white, and it has more columns. Those extra columns are in anticipation of questions, but what we'll talk about in the 10th February report and what hopefully we'll focus on today is just the 2 columns that are up on the screen, which is the total council movements from the various proposals to bring expenditure down primarily, and the rates excluding the water bill charges, which include volumetric metered water. It also includes a connection charge, which we hadn't talked about in the earlier. So it's in the handout, it's the first dual columns and the third dual columns. So and trying to relate it to the balancing this, what was supposed to be a seesaw actually, on that first slide. We have on the screen colour-coded green and yellow, but in your black and white, you'll just see the labels internal and external. So we've got various initiatives to try to bring those costs down, which are supported by attachment information, and just to be sure that councillors are comfortable with what's proposed. So we went, in December we came to you with a 13.5% increase, and net of growth was 13. There have been, there is always review, like all numbers are moment in time, and there has been some review and connection, which actually has moved that base number to 13.64. So we have declared that there the primary movement is actually an unfavourable movement in depreciation, which was based around a very close line-by-line look at the projects and when depreciation is expected to hit on those projected projects in our corporate planning system, and the work in progress or WIP schedules at present. So our trying to avoid those challenges last year where things got cleaned up at the last minute, she's had a very good look and said actually there will be more depreciation hitting by that year, which nets out kind of broadly in that sort of 500,000 once we've done other kind of adjustments around it. So we can give you more information on that over the next week as we pin it down, but just declaring now it's sitting at about 13.64. The first set of adjustments are on that left-hand side of the seesaw on the internal costs. How are we looking at our resourcing and the way we manage things like contingency, deliverability and timing. So in terms of the CapEx reductions, we talked about an overall target of trying to get from next year's budget from 497 million down to 400 million. The first step of that has been done by the team internally, looking at deliverability, some key changes we know about timing of projects, and also a proposal around reducing the contingency budgeted for next year. So it's staying in some projects but getting moved out, and also undertaking to manage a smaller amount of contingency through kind of managing across projects. So in total, it's moved 58 million out of the budget, and we're estimating that that's going to bring the rates requirement on interest down by about $1 million. That doesn't seem quite as high as we'd like it to be, and that's partly because some of that movement's in Tauranga West, which was offset by funding. So we've just been conservative. All these numbers are calculated at that high level of what we'd expect, but they are calculated outside of our corporate planning system. So they are rounded, as you can see, and there will be some slight movements. So the second area of reduction is in OPEX, and there are a range of proposals in there. They are in what is called Attachment 1 and Attachment 2. Attachment 2 is confidential because it does involve people and also some commercial people we've kind of contracted with to resource us. So there's detail in those two attachments to say we will adjust those unless you have raised any concerns about areas of adjustment. So that is taking an extra 2.6 million out of those budgets. So and the third adjustment in there is not yet achieved, but it is an undertaking which Craig might like to talk about to do a further efficiency review and to pull more money out. So at the moment, from an accounting point of view, it will go in as a savings target. It won't be translated in any real sense to individual budget lines, but the undertaking from the COFO is to make those real before the final annual plan is signed off. So in total, that is reducing 5.2 million out of those December budgets. And then, sorry?
Through the chair, can I just add that these are rates impacts of these savings, and the actual gross amount of the savings is significantly higher, if that makes sense. Yes. This is the net rates impact. So we just need to make that clear, so that this is not the savings levels which are higher. This is the rates impact of those savings levels.
And those attachments have a little table at the bottom that shows you that. So in total, if we're taking about 4.8 million of expenditure out, so you'll see that in the statement of comprehensive revenue expense, but the rates impact of that is less. And that's partly because they're mainly hitting allocators, which are 70% rates and funded in other ways.
And the 1.6, the second level of saving, equates to 2.3 million savings gross as well.
So is it possible to have an extra column to actually have those numbers? Because
yes.
as just a normal beanie, I really look at those numbers and I struggle. It's an extra thinking just to get
Yes.
these numbers. So that the numbers, the actual numbers that translate into savings rates changes, that would be great to have as well. And this, so, and going forward, can we just have this format so that when we see this again, we're welcome, Councillor Correct, so that we just go back to this, so we can always have this sort of format, because then we can just be standardised, please. But an extra column be useful too, please.
Yes. So this is on the agenda already for the meeting on the 10th, but we could table with the extra column if that's helpful for that meeting.
Yes, please.
Right. So the external changes are from the right-hand side of the seesaw. And the first two are just on review of some of those activities and the charging and revenue they were looking for against their costs. So the first one is, I know in the seesaw it's called wastewater, it's not, it's waste, curbside waste collection, which is a targeted rate. And it, just looking at the cost structures in there, there is no need to increase that rate above the current charge for this year, and that would save, as a rate increase, that would reduce that by 1.3 million. So that is just straight review and analysis that we do not need to make that surplus for the year in that activity. Secondly, the second one is a stormwater targeted rate levy. So that that targeted rate was set after the 2011 floods, and council wanted to be sure, and it was because there was work needed, particularly in particular areas of the city, but it was felt that these events happen, and we should, the whole city should help to support and have a fund available to support response. And so an annual levy was established. The council agreed to a policy so that people knew, and it was to fund remediation works or works to avoid future flooding in those spaces. So in Matua Automoto, there'd been a lot of work, a lot of subdivision over overland flow paths. There'd been things done in the past that made areas quite flood prone, and so work was done to remediate that sort of risk, and a policy was put in place which was a depth times velocity policy that we would focus that kind of investment where there was a risk to life from flooding that was moving through quickly. That's been around since 2011, 2012. The projects required are not coming through under that policy to that level, so we currently have a balance in that reserve of about 14.5 million. That is money we've collected through that targeted rate that has not yet been spent for purposes related to stormwater flood response. And so 2 years ago, a decision was made. So the amount collected was reduced to closer to $500,000 for the last 2 years. In the LTP, underlying LTP, it had been at $1 million. It wasn't kind of picked up in the draft, and so we're looking at that, looking at the balance of works and suggesting that we should go back to the $500,000 per annum levy, which would bring the rates requirement down further, and continuing to build up that reserve at the same rate. The next item was again just a financial adjustment that was made to user fee revenues based on, like we normally do an inflation adjustment on all user fees and charges, and in the corporate planning system it had been based on a 2.3% inflation. Of course, inflation has been higher than that, it's more at 3%, and so the proposal that if you put it to that inflationary cost, then you would get a 3% adjustment, which would actually, again, because user fees overall tend to offset rates in most activities, the portion we've estimated is about 300,000 of rates requirement that could be reduced. And then the final one in there is one of the topics for today is to pull out that additional amount of money from the capital program to bring it down closer to 400 million does require some thinking about prioritisation of projects. So Susan will take you through, and you have been sent a green kind of, or a spreadsheet that sort of starts with green shading, which is capital prioritisation, and that's identified projects that are not yet committed or considered critical, that you may want to look at the high-level prioritisation that staff applied, which is a very simplistic formula, and say, do some of these qualify for being moved onto a later year list or a bring forward list, so that we can manage a capital program at that 400 million rather than 500 million, which brings through some of these savings and interest this year, more interest next year, and the depreciation flows through on those projects. So that kind of journey, we're happy to take any questions on those, but for the kind of the difficult ones have had their own time allotted at this meeting to kind of go through and receive any comments on the detail, which is those myriad of attachments. And then that took us through, if we sort of look at those movements, it takes us through to about 8.9% or 9.4%, then taking growth off 8.9% for the business, excluding the charges that come on the water bill. So, and then we're saying if you're targeting 7.5%, we need more savings, so we need to consider where they might come from.
Okay, I'm just going to stop you. I've got a couple
Yep.
of questions. Thank you,
Okay.
Catherine. So, Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Crowther.
Thank you. Just that last one, talking about the CapEx, and I look at the effect of taking $45 million out of the pond. Very, very minimal effect on rates according to this. Is that right? And then what are the other things that we might...
So the way we've calculated that million is it's, and it's a rule of thumb, as all these are on this table, is it's 50% of the interest costs on that 45 million for that year. The following year, that one would jump to 2 because you've saved that debt. But in the year that we're talking about, you don't spend everything on at the beginning, and there's no depreciation factored into that first year. It's assumed those projects wouldn't produce an asset to be depreciated till the following year.
Sorry, I guess my question / point is that from an accounting point of view, yep, you're getting a fraction of a percent this year and maybe double that next year, but what is the fallout from not doing those projects is probably my other thing. Is the benefit to the community actually bigger than 0.3% on the rates? So
that is a consideration for council, and that's why we've put those prioritisation sheets and all the information in, and we've got an hour allocated to that for you
just
to
keeping
consider.
It front of mind when we're doing that. To me, it's not worth that small amount of money.
Right.
And just on that, so so we've had a spreadsheet that Catherine and Craig have shared with me just in terms of the interest costs if we have got 100,000 less capital the current year, because we're not paying interest on that next year, and whatever we're taking out next year. But they were quite chunky amounts that so the total amount of interest that you've allowed in the 13.3 annual plan, that's assuming 500 million capital spend in 25-26, which we know we're not going to achieve. So where's that saving? Because we're not paying for that interest. Where's that in your list?
It's sitting in the balancing item, so I'll get to that shortly.
But that's quite a big chunky number, 6 million.
So this year you've got 500 million of capital.
But we've already heard that we're not going to spend it.
Yeah, but the question is, these are projects that won't quite be finished. So you might have half a hole in the ground or half a road done. So you're going to want to carry forward that budget, even though you didn't delivery-wise achieve it, so your debt's lower, you're going to want to carry forward some of those projects. So if you carry it forward, and you deliver it in the first 2 months of next year, then there is no significant saving from not delivering the 400. And so what we're saying is there'll need to be some decisions and review of what you don't deliver this year to say how much of it was on hold and we'll keep it on hold for 2 years, and so then it is a saving for next year. But if it's construction that hasn't quite got finished and I'm going to finish it and I'm going to do the next 400 as well, then it's called a carry forward. It adds on to that, and so it isn't a net saving.
And can you tell me how the carry forward for into this current year was 12 million?
We can bring that back to you. There was
Well, it's just the big numbers that you
Yeah.
know, I think we need to be recognising. I think we have heard we're not going to spend 500 million this year because we're not because we're holding anything up, but that therefore has a consequential impact on the interest we will pay next year, and that doesn't seem to be in these numbers. And that's not, we're not having to make any decisions on that. That's just actual, and it'll be a lower interest this year as well because we do borrow to do those projects.
Yes, there'll be interest savings this year on things that aren't achieved. We would need a decision on carry forwards and what is not getting carried forward before we would be fully banking, and we will not bank 100 million. You will end up carrying forward some of that unspent because it will be things that are just delayed, say in the city centre or say on one of these roading projects. So you need to understand that carry forward process. Our aim is to bring that to you in April and say looks like, because it moves all the time, it even moves at year end, and say this is what we think will be your carry forward. So we won't be able to get that finalised opening balance or the level of true saving into next year. But yes, I agree with you, there's an element of that, and so that feeds into that balancing item. I absolutely agree with you. It's just how large that is. In a perfect world, and I think the modelling that you've seen kind of overstates that perfect world because in the written words at the bottom it says we've assumed none of this stuff was associated with subsidies, etc. So in a perfect world it could be 3 to 4 million. In a less than perfect world it's probably going to be a couple of million. So it becomes part of that balancing line. And so you'll see on the screen it says balances the extent of reduction in carry forwards and or level of service adjustment. And if you're excluding the whole of water, that would be 4.4 million to find, and yes, a significant portion of that could be found out of those two things. It is not going to be the full 4.4 million.
But if it's half of that, then that's 2 million, and that's a bigger number than anything we've got on this. So it's just a number we can't ignore. It should be, even if it's there as a don't know yet, but let's put it in because it's quite a big number.
Yes, and so we sort of tried to do it in that wording. If you feel that the wording is not clear enough, or I can bullet point that out, it is part of the target, and it's definitely moving, and it is subject to decisions on what projects you're going to carry forward, as opposed to just move out several years. So again, it is a decision process. It's not one you're possibly ready to do now. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, we've got a question from Rotorua.
Kia ora, everyone. Just trying to understand, we're obviously talking here from a revenue perspective, but I'm just asking the question, when we say we've taken waters out, I'm assuming we've taken all the waters OPEX out as well, and I'm just confirming that that doesn't change our revenue requirements.
Yes, so it's more the how we're interpreting the target, and you don't have. I've handed out actually a fuller table, which will be one of your attachments. I think it's about attachment 7 in the. I'm wondering if I could share it, but. The way we set it out is we said if you're looking at your whole council, that balance to solve for in your opening balance, your carry forwards, your level of service is 12.4 million. If you say we're going to only aim for the 7.5, excluding the costs of the water supply, then you need to find 4.4 million. So it's a much easier target because under the Water Service Delivery Plan, you have kind of decided, and it's been agreed, that water activity needed to have higher revenue, and that movement is 25.6 million. So it's a big driver of the overall, if you look at the whole story, rates increase. And so that conversation in December was saying, given that big driver, given that's kind of part of your water service delivery plan and not something that you want to significantly move at this moment, it is helpful to look at your 7.5 as what actually goes out on the rates bill, which excludes the water bill. And conveniently, the water's bill is where price increase is going to be highest. So in a later slide, we'll talk about what's happening on the rates bill if you aim for a 7.5 movement on the rates bill, which is what people are normally looking at. And yes, there is a conversation that has kind of been around that water supply is going to get more expensive. And
okay, so just to define my question, so we're talking about the capex, right? So one of the things we're trying to do is reduce capex to 400 million. Now, out of that 400 million, there's going to be some waters capex in that, right? So we're still assuming that the rates are going to pay for the capex in waters. I'm assuming, because I can't see the number there that takes the 100 odd million that we're spending in waters out of.
Yeah. So stormwater and wastewater are sitting in your balance. It's only the water supply that's coming out, and obviously the revenue for water supply is what pays for the water supply capex. Probably when we get to Susan, we'll have a look at how big that water supply capex is. I don't think it's a big driver of your capex program next year. So I don't think it's overly material, but we haven't taken... Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to interpret your question, but perhaps if we can have a look at that.
Well, my understanding was we're basically taking the three waters out of the budgets. So we're talking like we're trying to assume that we've got a water services organisation which is running independently, so is not part of our rates bills. So I'm just asking, is all the OPEX related to those waters been taken out in our assumptions? Because at the moment we're only talking revenue. So we're taking it out of the revenue, but then when we actually go down and look at the OPEX, does the OPEX change significantly that we can reduce our rates, once we take waters out, once we strip waters out completely?
Yeah, so the reductions that we've put in front of you, I think there's only about one that applies to waters. They are in the rest of the business, if that helps. On that wider attachment, if you excluded all the revenue from all three waters, because stormwater in particular is actually costing less this year than last, your target to save to get 7.5 is 6.8 million, not 4.4, and you would end up with a lower rates increase.
Yep. So the answer, Mahe, is the costs associated with delivering the waters portion of CapEx has not been identified separately and factored into what would be costs associated with water. So it's still a real cost. It doesn't actually impact on overall rates, but the way that it could be presented is that you could quantify the costs associated with the delivery of the water CapEx, and then list that separately with those water costs. You with me, Catherine?
Yeah, I thought that was what we were doing. We were stripping waters out completely, and I think that would change I don't know how it would change it, like as in the quantums. But I thought everything basically to do with waters, we were making the assumptions that would be in a separate organisation and dealt with separately. So I just see, we've got reduction in revenue from stormwater targeted levy as a saving, but that's not because it shouldn't be in here. That was my understanding, but I'm just trying to understand how that actually works. So we've still got waters costs in our OPEX that we're covering from general rates. Is that what we're saying?
No, we don't cover water supply from general rates at all. We cover.
But that's one water.
Yeah, so water supply we cover from a volumetric. We send a water bill with a connection charge and a volumetric charge. The stormwater is covered largely from general rate, and wastewater.
Yeah. But I thought we'd strip that out. We can quantify that.
Yes, we can strip them out, and that can be the presentation that you decide to use. And the only thing that changes you haven't got the multi-column table that I've put out to everybody else, and I don't know if someone could find. Okay, but it was you'd look at the column 2. Everything is the same largely, except your starting point, excluding Three Waters, is 14.3%. That is, everything else went up on an average of 14.3%, because stormwater hadn't gone up and wastewater was probably, I think, about 10 or 11%. So they were, if you like, in the range of activities, those two activities in your rates were increasing less. So if you take them out, what the balance that's left that we have to solve for to get to 7.5 is a 14.3% increase. And so all the savings pretty much are assumed to apply to non-waters. There hasn't been a lot of change in the waters budgets. And that means that with all those savings I listed through, you would get to a 10.4% rates increase, and then to get to 7.5, you would have to solve for an additional 6.8 million. So it's just how you wish to decide on the target. That's, what is the target you want to decide on? Is it 7.5% of everything except what's on the water bill, or is it 7.5% of all the activities of council except Three Waters activities? And so that's a decision you need to make. We are working on the assumption it's everything that you're going to bill on your rating bill, and so it excludes what you bill on your water supply bill. But that is your call and your direction. It's a harder nut to crack to get to 7.5 if it's all Three Waters out.
Yeah, well, I guess my understanding was that it was all waters out, and the reason being is so we could compare apples to apples. When we're talking the rates cap, or potential rates cap, that we could say this is what it would look like if everything was out, because that was my understanding. But I'm happy for the council to if I didn't get that quite right.
Councillor Crowther.
I fully support the Mayor on that. I think there had been some communication, I think, in December, but I think we clarified that in January, and that's my understanding is we'd been pretty clear in the direction we gave to you, Marty, around that, sort of in an internal discussion to clarify that issue. But from my point of view, that was, Mahe sort of got in before I was going to say that I think we need to either go on the first column or do a complete sort of waters out calculation, because I think at the moment we've got all these different columns, and for the people in Rotorua there's an extra column, but it's not really to my mind, getting where we need to go, which is it's either all in or all out for waters, I think, because anything else will be just seen as a fudge, because it'll just be we're hand-picking whatever numbers look better or something. And I think we need to get away from that, be really clear, really transparent, and it's either what's been happening always, which is just the total figure, or in the new operating environment with waters out and other councils in some cases seemingly doing that for their annual plans, then we have good grounds for doing that, I think. But it needs to be one or other, not any halfway. The other thing I was going to say, and it's apologies to most people in the room who've heard me say this a little bit many times, but because Craig and Renica probably haven't, my view is that stormwater targeted rate, irrespective of what we do with waters, that should not be cut. And I've said it before that I think stormwater is the biggest issue facing Tauranga in terms of risk and unforeseen costs. And that was put there specifically to deal with issues proactively. And we saw, I'm not talking about Moao, but I'm talking around the city, we saw on public land, things happen there where we've lost public land, basically, usable public land, and collapsed onto a walkway and things. And I'm not saying that use of that stormwater levy would have solved that particular issue, but it could have. And that's precisely what it's there for. It's to put in place, secondary overland flow paths. I've been dealing with a number of people in my neck of the woods who had to, sandbag up their homes and stuff because of overflow from the road down into their properties and things. Now, there's obviously private versus public, but in some of those cases it's had council infrastructure put in. So there's a number of issues here, and I think we're in danger of kind of going, right, let's just cut this because we don't need it. And I think we need to be looking at doing the exact opposite. It's not a lot of money. 14 million will go nowhere in what we need to do around the city. We know from a comment I remember you made, Christine, a few years ago, we're talking billions of dollars of natural hazards, prevention, and stormwater is an absolute key part of that.
Thank you, Councillor Crowther. Marty.
Yeah, so there's been quite a lot of discussion, obviously, about the stormwater targeted rate, and following the 2005 and 2010 floods, where I think there was it 17 or 27 houses was part of a purchase by council at that time, and then there was the overland flow studies and essentially hazard mapping of all of that flood risk across the city. Since then, a program has been put in place, funded through that targeted rate, and I understand that well over $100 million has been spent on that process, and that was on the basis of very good hazard information, identifying risk, and then a very, very deliberate and calculated investment to address that risk. I actually think it's important that we report to council perhaps on this. We talked about doing a separate report on how we manage that hazard across the city. Our landscape has changed. We've just had a major event here where essentially our stormwater systems performed well. Okay, there may have been one hotspot area where there's still some work to do, but by and large, the event that we've just had, the city got through that largely unscathed in terms of managing its stormwater. The landscape has changed in terms of hazard, and I think there's a much more, if you like, forward-thinking conversation to be had about a targeted rate for other types of hazards that perhaps would become more prevalent in the city. And you'll be aware that we do have a lot of hazard mapping in relation to landslides. 2 or 3 years ago, we produced that information. There hasn't been a similar targeted rate applied to address those issues. And so I think there's a much larger conversation for this council to have to manage a range of hazards into the future. And I think the reflection on how we've managed stormwater is something that we can learn from.
We did talk about there not being actions or decisions at this workshop, but we have. Can we just note that as an action, please. And I think the other thing I put in, just that quarterly report on headcount from the beginning. Great, okay, thank you. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just while we're talking on stormwater, the levy that's referred to in the papers, is that what's colloquially known as the Robson Reactive Reserve, or is it something pertaining to 2005? And so that big CapEx program from 2005 was certainly before my time, and I think the reactive reserve was a lot smaller, but it was in terms of clean up and other mitigating measures. So, yeah, what are we looking at there?
It was a comprehensive package of actions, interventions and approaches. So what Marty was trying to do was to paint you the whole pitch, or the picture. So there was a comprehensive capital program, which is what in my recollection is sort of 100 million, but we're checking that. There was the reactive reserve, which was to be able to respond if there was an event and help people who might have, say, contaminated wastewater as a result of intense rainfall. The reactive reserve also helped to deal with the depth times velocity, so where a child would be at risk in a residential area or adult be at risk in a non-residential area. Then there was also the policy initiatives, which was where Plan Change 27 came in, which was, and we didn't proceed with intensification zoning until we'd managed that, because we didn't want to increase density in the city and not have to be managing flooding in the city. So it was a package of about 5 or 6 quite different initiatives that together worked collectively to make a significant difference. And I think what we're doing is we're pulling together that story so we can explain to elected members. And yes, so the Robson Reserve was that the reactive reserve component of that much bigger package of actions.
And supplementary, so that targeted levy is just the reactive reserve though, isn't it? Yeah, cool, thank you.
Craig, did you want to say something?
Thank you. So two things. I think what Marty's describing about the changing environment and the volatility is more so a consideration for the long-term plan than the coming annual plan. And I understand from our experts the assessment is we could make that reduction to the stormwater target rate for the annual plan. And then there's a much deeper and more visionary thought process required for the LTP. So that's there. The other thing is, so we can certainly have a water supply only or 3 waters framework. Based on the table, the implication is the delta to solve would grow from 4.4 million to 6.8 million. So analytically, the rates reduction to find is more feasible under water supply only and grows by 2.4 million under 3 waters. So, but that's an analytical perspective as opposed to the broader view about waters and its transition over time. But so just to note those 2 things.
And just in terms of by June 27, we're still all one organisation. So, yeah.
Go live is the day after.
Yes, yeah, correct. But the annual plan, we need to collect enough rates to pay for waters in 26, 27.
Correct.
So
yes,
it's fine knowing how we separate them out, but at the end of the day, the rates have to cover the OPEX for waters and the capital for waters and everything else. Right, so that's just, I think, that's...
Yeah, that's important, I think.
It's really important, I think. I'm aware that I've just been told my timekeeping is lousy from the CEO, so I just wonder if it would be sensible to move on to the capital discussion now, unless there's objection.
Thank you. Yeah, and back to Councillor Taylor's earlier comments. There's something about a recent perennial wish list that's close to $500 million for the program, and the reality of what gets delivered, which is more like 400 to 420 million. So I think that that's relevant to this discussion. So I think between Catherine and Susan, to Catherine's left, I think we're going to just provide a bit of a summary and then open it up for discussion, if everyone's happy.
You're on big screen, Rotorua. Yeah. You look as though you're actually focusing on your phones more than on us. Hate to tell you. I think Susan's going to take you over with a spreadsheet. Count to 10 backwards, and it'll come up in Italian. You certainly may.
Can I just, in terms of the staff's takeaway message from the last session, I'm just not sure. Was your summary, Madam Chair, to have all of council as the default setting for that? So staff prepare 7.5% using the whole of council. Is that where we'd got to, or was it what we talked about also as excluding all waters? Because I think there needs to be an action point, doesn't there, around which way we're doing it out of those two. Because I think we've ruled out the water only previously, but are we clear on that?
The report for Tuesday is written focusing on the target of 4.4 million. That is just dealing with the water bill, because that was the decision from December. We will need to table, probably redo the table with that second column. That second column remains correct. The only saving that relates to Three Waters is that stormwater levy. And so technically at the moment it's part of the stormwater activity, so therefore excluded. The conversation you've had, I'm not sure whether you're, there's this whole thing of where does that fund sit? Does it sit with the CCO or does it sit with the council? That conversation hasn't been had, so that makes that a little bit more complicated, but depending on your decision about how much you would rate for that, probably is something you can discuss.
Are you comfortable with that, Mayor Mahe?
Well, I'm trying to think. The meeting we had when we came back, I thought we were excluding the Three Waters. We're reporting Three Waters separately to. That was my view of the direction that had been given.
But who's then doing the annual plan for Three Waters that's actually still within TCC for 26-27? Because it's not a separate entity. So who's approving that annual plan if it's not us?
No, we're doing it, but we were gonna report it. We're going to report it separately. So it's still part of the annual plan. It's just not. It's reported completely separately. I thought that was the direction that had been given, but yeah, it could be.
So all of the operating costs, all the allocations, you want those all separated by July.
I thought that's exactly what we were getting. We were getting the two columns, basically, or three columns. You had waters, non-waters, and total. I thought that's what had been agreed. And when we're talking rates increases, we're talking about the rates increase on the non-waters.
So we do have an attachment in that report that is, so it's really just a presentation and approach to that table and guidance. So we'll table the different table with the column and the target of 6.8. But yes, one of the attachments in the report and that's available to you for that Tuesday meeting has waters separate to the whole of council and a residual council. So it has those 3 columns that you're asking for.
And
Yeah,
so
but
interest,
then-
for
but
example,
then
on
my-
capital is separated too.
Yeah, so my understanding was it was a 7.5% increase excluding waters. That was my understanding of the direction we'd set. Obviously, yeah, that's where I thought we were headed, and therefore, and that's why the question really came. We're talking revenue, but does our revenue change significantly once we take all that OPEX and CAPEX and everything out of waters? Does that actually change the expense line and therefore have an impact on the revenue line? That was my question, really, because we're kind of saying, oh, we're taking one part of waters out, but then we've got all the other expenses still in there. So
So we can give you the rates increase. I think it really is that second column largely. It's saying the 14.3, that is the whole activity excluding waters, and we can put a separate one in a similar way for waters only, and they will add up to the total council, because that's the presentation that you're wanting. This presentation about getting the rates target is different from the revenue expenditure presentation, which is in an attachment already, which shows you relates these increases which are based around the revenue against the expenditure. So you'll see how that unfolds in that attachment. It's about attachment 6 to the report. So I can send those out to you as an email to so you understand what we're talking about after this. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if I can just add, I think there's always been a nuance, which was that we wanted to test the rates impacts of taking out 3 waters. And it turns out that simply taking out water supply makes it easier to solve for that 7.5%. So if I can just clarify that.
yeah, well, I guess it's not about what's easy. It's about what's and again, this is my understanding. The reason we take it out is because it's going to be out and it's not going to be part of a rates cap. So it gives us a direct comparison when we're talking to our people to say, this is what council looks like with waters out compared to the rates cap. So yeah, that's sort of that's why I thought that was the direction, but yeah.
Yeah, no, understand that. I mean, each of the 3 businesses has a different revenue profile. But absolutely understand that the intention is, well, I guess that depends on what happens on Tuesday, but assuming stormwater is in.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it should, because the cabinet paper said very clearly stormwater, no matter what you do with stormwater, has to be excluded from the rates cap. So you just have to have another calculation then. But
right.
Basically, I think we're all clear as elected members that what Mahe is saying is what we thought we agreed to. And I think there may have been a miscommunication, because I picked that up earlier, but I think we need to get on track for Tuesday to talk in that languaging. Whatever the result, it's just about doing the right thing as opposed to the easiest thing.
Understand.
Councillor Morris.
Thanks,
And
Madam
this is
Chair.
the last comment before we move on to capital. And Susan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. That's what buying the chair a coffee does. You get right reply.
Hasn't arrived yet.
Yeah. So
enjoy your moment.
the resolutions in Tuesday's council meeting don't reflect the sort of the direction that the mayor and the council have given. Is that right? Around waters in and out or total? Because I'm looking at I think it was resolution F in the supplementary agenda, talks about a savings target, which doesn't, and I appreciate numbers can move, but doesn't line up with any of the options I can see on the spreadsheet. It certainly doesn't line up with total council or total excluding 3 waters. Is that correct? What is the...
It should line up with the 4.4 column, the rates excluding fixed and metered water.
Okay, so it's rates excluding...
But that's okay, we can also table some suggested rewording of that.
Okay.
Can I just clarify, is there I mean, obviously we put the stormwater targeted rate levy up as an option because it's one of the decisions. In the presentation, I would end up putting that in the waters column at the moment. So that's what you'd be expecting? Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the section we're meant to do at 30 minutes after we started. All yours.
Morning, everyone.
Welcome, Susan.
So this first slide, so we presented in December a capital budget of $498 million. That's what's currently in our corporate planning model. Of that 498, 49 million of that was for contingency and risk budgets. We have recently gone through the program again, bearing in mind this is a very fluid program that is constantly changing, and 1 month delay in a project can have a significant impact on our year-end forecast. So we've gone through this exercise and we've managed to reduce the program by a further $58 million. So that gets us down to 440, which if the intention is to reduce the program in the 27 financial year down to 400 million, that leaves us with another $40 million worth of projects that we need to exclude. So this is what today is all about, reviewing those projects that, based on this analysis using 70% risk assessment, 30% strategic alignment, what are the projects that we would, based on that outcome ranking, would actually drop out of the program, and are you comfortable with that $40 million worth that we can actually go in and update our corporate planning model and make sure that we are truly realising some of these interest savings to flow through into the draft annual plan. If we maybe just go to the next, I'll just down the page. So it just shows the way that the projects have been categorised for your information. So
can I just ask a question on committed?
Sure.
So let's take out required by legislation, even that are, or even under construction. There are some projects that are listed, or groups of projects that are listed, that it's hard to understand how they, because they were committed in December on the spreadsheet we got in December. So what is our process around committing to projects in a plan that's 6 months ahead? And sorry, I'll take one of Renika's. I think there's 4 million of traffic safety improvements in committed. Now, is that actually committed, or is that that's a bundle you think need to happen, but actually 500,000 of that possibly could be delayed or brought forward? So what does committed mean in that respect?
That's a great example. That is the, let's say, bulk fund for smaller improvements, the odd speed bump or corner improvement, those sorts of things. We call them committed because we have been backlogging them. There's 18 to 24 months of backlog in these smaller ones. Having said that, we could reduce the level of service with regards to how we respond to these requests for smaller safety improvements. You could reduce it and simply allow for a larger response time. That is definitely an option for this bulk fund. Does that help?
Well, to me, that, like, I want to make a conscious decision and say we want to do those, but at the moment it's committed, so we don't have any say in it. So there's nothing that comes to council to say, do we want to say, yes, let's do 4 million of safety improvements in 26, 27. That's a good conversation to have with our people, but at the moment it just sits there, oh, it's committed, and we don't even look at it. We look at stuff that is, we look at our digital program, which just always gets a hammering, and then it fails, so we have to approve the budget anyway. So it's just the question of committed. If we've got a contract, that's fine, but if it's something we want to do because it's a level of service, are we saying that is that committed, or is that a different group that is, we'd really like to do this and we think it's a good idea, and hey, council, do you want to approve these, because we probably will?
Most of the committed are singular projects. I don't know if there's any more of these bulk type projects. I believe it's been put in here from a committed point of view, but we can have this conversation under level of service. There's a few CapEx items that you can categorise as level of service conversations.
So I'll just speak to the bulk funds. So the bulk funds have been a method in the past because we know that we do need to make these types of investments. The question is whereabouts in the city and what are the priority projects to go into those bulk funds. We did have a briefing which was actually meant to be today, but because we were going to have earlier discussions on the annual plan, but because of the event, that it got deferred and we've prioritised this. So you're absolutely right. What we were intending to do and what was scheduled before we change our priorities was to come to talk to you, give you an overview of all of the bulk funds that exist. There are a number of them across the business, what their purpose is, how the staff go through the identifying the pool of projects that would be eligible under that bulk fund and how they go through to prioritise it, and then having the discussion with this council about what was the level of involvement and how do you want to make calls. So that was absolutely scheduled as sitting on my list to reprioritise now, given we're just re-looking at the whole work programme.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Crowther.
Can we just roll back to the previous slide? So this question's for Marty. If we knock this back to 400 million, are we going to deliver 350? Just, it's a serious question, because if we're going to start taking stuff out of it to get to 400, is that going to further delay other things because we don't actually get to the 400 in fact?
Look, historically, if we have a budget of 400 and there's concerns about under-delivery, some projects, things happen,
Yep.
We know that. Not very often do they get ahead of schedule and come in well under budget, but often there's delays because of consenting and or weather events and so if there can be, and historically we've done this, identified projects that can be brought forward. Essentially, you can then manage your delivery better, and you will hit the 400 or get very close to the 400 if there's a degree of flexibility to pull key projects forward in advance. So
that was sort of the point I was looking for, was that in fact we'd have some shovel ready for a term that we can actually top it up with.
Susan could probably talk to this because you managed that process historically.
Yes, and I guess just to hark back to that earlier conversation about this year's program. So in our corporate planning model, we have assumed 480 mil capital spend the current year, and the most recent forecasts are coming in from the business around 414 million. So there is this big carry forward that we are going to need to spill into the 27 financial year, quite probably, a lot of those. So it is likely to be quite a lot more delivered, that if we set a budget at 400 for additional budgets for next year, it's likely it's going to be more than that once carry forwards are actioned.
Yep. Yeah, sort of get that. So what happens to this year where we haven't done that? So we've obviously made some savings and interest and all the rest of it. How do we account for that in the current year? So we're going to be...
So the financial forecasts that come to you will be identifying where there have been interest savings and,
But that was my earlier question, Rod, that it's actually... We know that we've got some savings this year. We're not going to hit our capital, therefore there's going to be some interest savings, which was a $4 or $6 million on a forecast I got. So where does that go and how does that impact? Because we hear the things that are going to keep next year high, but not that we've got some savings now. So we're not always get all the information, I feel.
Okay, yeah. My point really though is that if we keep chopping it back and we don't achieve what we chop it back to, are we just going to keep on reducing the amount that we actually deliver, which is going to put us even further behind?
I agree.
Well, look, if we were to set it at 400, by the time we build in carry forwards, you could be up to 430, 440 anyway, and so if you land on 400, that would be a pretty damn good outcome.
So just on the I'm just going to say on the committed, I just would like staff to really say, so another one I'll choose, that's Oropi Forest and Mountain Reserve. That hasn't come to us, it's 538,000, and it's something to me that, shouldn't we know about that if it's committed? Do we?
We do know.
Is that the Techt Park?
It's the bike park.
And have we approved it? For next year? There was no cost? Okay, so it's just those things are, especially if they're good things, I'd like to talk about them, not just have them, oh, that's already been approved, we don't talk about it.
Can I know this was a targeted question about Oropi, but by and large, there is Spaces and Places as a portfolio where things have been committed because we have deeply engaged with iwi and community. There is projects in that category that haven't been signed on the dotted line and we have a contractual obligation to. We can go over that Spaces and Places portfolio separately if you wish from a committed point of view, but pulling those out of the plan eliminates good news stories as well as creates significant reputational damage, and that's why they're sitting in there.
And I would like to talk about them at council rather than talking about council stopped us doing that. I'd like them to come to council to say, these are the great things we're doing this year. For example, we did a public consultation on which playgrounds we were going to upgrade last year after we'd done our annual plan consultation. But it was a terrific topic to put in the consultation of the annual plan, not 2 months later. So let's bring these things to council meetings so we can actually see the good stuff we do as well as the negative we do.
Yeah, I think it wasn't our intention to workshop that the committed. Well, weren't we going to go through a process and through a workshop and go through the whole capital program and have this conversation? I don't know whether that's scheduled. It feels like we're running out of time.
Yeah, I think we're trying to do a couple of things here. One is we're trying to land on a budget that you can approve, and if you wish to go to consultation, that we can get through the consultation in a timeline that enables you to meet your statutory requirement to adopt an annual plan by the 30th of June. That's really our priority focus, and given normally before Christmas we would have pretty much have landed on a budget. That hasn't occurred. The second issue is around the conversations and how you want to communicate that. So at the moment our focus is, what do you as elected members want to proceed with and what don't you want to proceed with? Do you have enough knowledge of the projects to make those decisions? And then once you've made the calls, then we can work through what needs to be communicated and work that through with you in more detail. We are very happy to do as many workshops as you need. The difficulty, particularly since we've come back post-Christmas, is to try to find time slots. We've managed to get 3 hours today and that's it. So that's the challenge that we have, is actually having the time with you to actually go through and do all these things. We're very happy to do it.
Okay, let's go back to the agenda. No, we're going to go back to the agenda. Come back to us.
Shall we then? We'll just launch on into the attachment that is that balance to be prioritised, which is the first table that was the attachment, and that draws a line. Thank you. That draws a line based on that prioritisation score. It's sorted high to low. All of the ones in green, we're saying under this very basic model of if you accept that order, all of the ones in green projects would be safe and would stay in the budget, and everything below that red line would essentially need to be either deferred or cancelled from the program. So I guess this is the opportunity to discuss whether you are all collectively comfortable that this is what we load through in the next iteration of our annual plan model, is to exclude those projects below the red line. Or if you want to make some trade-offs, or if in fact you are comfortable going higher than that $400 million cap, which will obviously have possible rating implications.
Maybe it would help, Susan, what's the gap we're dealing with between...
40 million, so 39.7 million.
Yeah, so in some ways it's prioritising what you see could reasonably fit within that gap to solve, and if you're not comfortable with that, a higher envelope than 400 million might be required, is where it takes you.
And where do carry forwards come? If we know we can deliver, what are we doing, 414 this year? That's a capability. These things sort of happen. If we've got another 40 of that to carry forward, does that supersede these, or does that go into the green or the red box on here?
That would be green, or that would be committed. They would be multi-year projects that we always have to do a sense check of, do we actually need to carry forward this budget because it is committed, or it's already in train, or there's already a hole in the ground. We need to continue on and finish this project. Yeah, otherwise there is an opportunity that you could either, again, not carry forward that budget, cancel the project, or defer it to beyond the annual plan year. So I guess the question is, all of these projects here, as an example, the cemetery master plan, that $1.9 million in the 27 financial year could not fit within the $400 million cap. But if you're not comfortable with that and you wanted to have a trade-off and exchange one of the projects that sits in the green down below the line and sub that one within the program, then we could do that on the next load. Is this something that you'd like to just step through line by line as to the projects that you think, you know? What's the other stuff? So the contingency has been reduced in this iteration from 49 million down to 26 million, or what works out to be.
Councillor Crowther, you weren't being very clear to people there. Can you say your comments, please, to all of us?
Well, I think in order to have a proper conversation, we need more information up front. So we need to understand the contingency seems ridiculously tiny for waters. 2% contingency for waters. I know there's lower risk projects, and I know that contingency can sometimes be accordingly, but just that contingency looks to me like you're just deferring contingency to the next year, which is when we need to not do things like that. We need to do the exact opposite of deferral, because the next year we've got to hit our rates cap. This year we don't have the rates cap. We can go to 7.5. Next year we have to go to 4 unless we have a special reason not to, unless there's a change of government. So to me, I'm just really concerned about the way that those words around contingency don't give me any confidence that we're trying to approach this in the right way. Like, we're trying to almost stack it instead of actually going, here are some really hard calls you're going to have to make. And I don't have confidence in those contingency numbers, or else we've got the whole contingency model wrong for the council based on the previous few years.
If you're able to just bear in mind, though, the contingency percentage that you see in that table there for waters, that's reflective of a single year. So total project budget contingencies for waters, because they have such a broad portfolio, they have many projects that they can push and pull and program manage a lot more effectively than the likes of major projects that have a handful of big chunky projects where the contingency needs to be a lot more upfront in the program. Waters has the flexibility to be able to take note of projects that they are going to need their contingency early. They can bring it forward and defer some projects that they have in their pipeline of work that aren't committed yet, and so they've just got, it allows them more flexibility than some of these other if you're just
Do we
looking
want
at
them
what
to
is
do,
it-
that's what I'm trying to get at. Do we want them to do that? Because the starting point is that they're doing that. Well, why are they doing that? No one's asked them to do that. Like, I'm really concerned about our waters program, especially the stormwater, and I'm looking at why are we constantly trying to do that? That's not the goal. The goal is to be straight up, what is the contingency? My personal view is I'm not so obsessed about reducing the contingency. I just want an honest contingency and to do it like Mahe says and display it clearly. But I think we're trying to juggle some numbers by moving contingency, and I don't think we should be doing that.
May I? The way that Waters plans is a very large multi-year cycle, and hence using time as a substitute for contingency can well be appropriate in that setting. That doesn't mean that individual projects within the water space don't carry an appropriate contingency, especially for known risks. But it means that we can do on a program level with less contingency because of timing flexibility.
Can I just make a suggestion perhaps on the way forward on this? We got a spreadsheet from Jeremy, I think, about some of the user charges and things we could take out of level of service, which I think we all might have given feedback on. The opportunity was there. Could we do something similar with this, where perhaps we all indicate the ones that we think could drop out, or maybe, and do it offline in our own time? Like, getting everybody together for this is going to be very difficult, I think.
Yes, you could do that, and also, as the Deputy Mayor was speaking before, you might want to identify any particular ones that you'd like to have some conversation about, because there's so many in there. That would be fine. So we could add, say, 2 columns. One is ones that you would like to, you think should come out, or a conversation to come out, and ones that you would like to have a discussion or further information on. We could easily circulate that.
Sorry, so from a staff point of view, that would be an effective way of doing it, or is it create work? I don't know.
Can you actually just have the spreadsheet with the 10 columns, so that, because you can send it as a link and we can just all update it at the same time, because it's always interesting to know what others are thinking, and therefore we can have conversations with how they're thinking as well.
The only issue is that we're looking for direction on Tuesday in that council meeting, so whether you can do that and feed that back in time, or whether, because we're, and it comes back to an earlier discussion we've had around whether you're consulting or not consulting. So if you're not going to publicly consult under the Local Government Act and Special Consultative, then you've got more time. If you do wish to consult, then we're looking for, the timeline would mean that you'd need to be some decisions on Tuesday. So those considerations dovetail together.
Christine, are you able to just explain the timelines that we're working to, and if you like, the gateways or decision points when they need to be made for us to achieve certain outcomes? Yeah, right. Thank you.
So around the table, are we comfortable that we do provide or chat to each other on the projects that are in the green and in the red? I think that's probably the way we need to. Offline, yeah. And the white, yes.
So in terms of timeline, we're looking for the draft annual plan content at the 3rd of March, so March meeting, to be able to get to the 3rd of March. The decisions you'd make next week would then enable all the documentation that needs to be prepared to flow into 3rd of March, because we need to get that agenda out, and it takes a while to actually pull the documents together. Catherine might want to talk about that from a financial point of view, and then I'll work through the rest.
So it's not just the documentation, but we have to actually make this stuff more real by putting it through the corporate planning system. So there's lots of, at the budget level, entries that will need to be made once we know which way we're proceeding. So those are all the lines that sit in those attachments 1, 2 and 3, and the capitalisation. We'll need to change items in that corporate planning system, run the model to provide the reliable revenue expenditure numbers and debt numbers.
And then you need to work through what are the key issues. So this is based on a consultation timeline. So if you don't do that, you've got time. So then that allows a couple of weeks to identify the key themes that you want. What conversation do you want to have with the community? Getting all of those words prepared and drafted, and getting the survey prepared or the questionnaire that would go out. That would be adopted on the 24th of March, and then you'd basically the following week you'd go live with consultation. Under the Act you've got to do 4 weeks. Easter falls in the middle of that, so you lose that time, and then Anzac as well. So that would then close the 1st of May. We would go straight into hearings on the 11th of May. That was when the agendas would be published. You'd run the hearings 18th to the 21st, and then you'd be moving into deliberations in early June. The decisions from your deliberations need to reflect it again. We have to rerun all the corporate planning systems, prepare the agenda, get that out in statutory timelines, and we have you adopting under the scenario on the very last statutory date, which is Tuesday the 30th of June.
Just a question, are there any reasons that councils are ever allowed to get an extension on that, the latest day to adopt an annual plan?
It's rare. It is a statutory non-compliance, which.
But if we got it, can you seek an approval? When does that ever happen?
It has happened in the past. I think the biggest issue is probably from a rates perspective and striking the rate. So that's a legal issue, and you can't get an exemption under the legislation, but you can write to the minister, and the minister can write back and say, I understand what's happening. But I think from a rates perspective, you can't strike a rate, and it creates some issues in our systems. Catherine's shaking her head about the practicalities of it.
So you approve that rates resolution just after you've approved the budget, and then there is a very busy process to be prepared for that first rates bill that goes out on the 1st of August. So
You're getting a little bit quiet, Catherine.
Oh, okay. So it's a very tight time frame, even with the adoption of an annual plan by the end of June, and without a budget, you can't rate for what you believe you're going to require for the next year. I think you might be able to be limited to what you rated the previous year, but yeah.
Yeah, that's right. There needs to be an adoption so that we can strike the new rate, so we can pay for the commitments that we have. So that's the final date. We need to work to that, and so we need to work backwards to understand what it is we need: decisions, clarification, consultation, or otherwise. So.
But
and this is really just, this is a workshop, so it's good to have this conversation, but ultimately we need to start getting some decisions about that we can work to.
Are we getting there? But just in terms of consulting or engaging, somebody did suggest that if we didn't consult, then we would just get an annual plan, the budget for the June meeting to sign it off. My requirement will be that we, irrespective of whether we're consulting or not, we'll still have a draft budget in May that we will have 6 weeks to talk to the community about and to ourselves about. So irrespective, that is still certainly my expectation that we will need that time to talk through a draft budget, whether it's a draft annual plan to consult on or not. So just please, that's a note too, please. Councillor Morris, then Councillor Roseboom, then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. In terms of the options presented earlier around the total council and the total excluding Three Waters, and we've got those savings targets there with the total council 12.4, and if we exclude Waters 6.8. Are we able to achieve either of those savings without consulting, or would we be required to consult in order to make the changes to the levels of service to get to that level? That's that's kind of the go, no-go for me in terms of consultation.
So the expectation for, even for those level of service decisions, they're not, for the most part, significant, requiring consultation. So that's why they've been identified. And we're just wanting a direction from councillors about which ones to set.
So that essentially significance and engagement policy, which there was a little bit of korero on the other day. Yeah, so they wouldn't reach that threshold, so we okay.
Scale, so the financial impact scale of it, the impact, the extent of impact on your community, whether that's a broad across your whole community and sort of minor, or does it affect a small group of people in a more significant way. So there are a series of considerations in the work that we've done. We've sort of assessed it and thought these ones are the ones that are less likely to be significant, although on most of them we've given you a range. So clearly the lower in the range, the less significant, and others we think are more appropriate to be dealt with through an LTP process where you would consult. So, but as you identify the ones that you're potentially more interested in, then we'll refine and give you a little bit more feedback. And if you give us an indication of the scale that you're interested in, we could then say, we think this would be or wouldn't be.
And in terms of quantum, year 3 of the LTP is 10.4%. So provided you're under that, that doesn't trigger any requirement.
So not wanting to nail anything down, but team are confident that either of those scenarios, 3 waters in or out, getting to the 7.5 level would not require consultation under the significance and engagement policy. Of course, it depends on where we go to, but what's been presented. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming understand the process by which you've got to the green and the clear on the projects. We're discussing year 26, 27, and you've got some in here, Belk Road future proofing, Belk Road roundabout land purchase. This is a very dynamic part of the city that's under high growth. It's possible that that may be required sooner if they get their growth in order to get the roading infrastructure finished. What opportunities do we have to pull these forward if we have to, if we don't approve them in this annual plan? Can we still, because certain individuals out there are going to get quite frustrated if we haven't prepared to, because we've committed to grow the industrial estate out there. We've made a commitment to the developer to grow and to the commercial interests out there to grow. So we need to keep them in mind that we may need to pull them forward if the developer gets a good head of steam up and gets some good weather, because these roads are essential for actual Belk Road itself.
So at any point, council can pass a resolution to bring forward expenditure. It just means that so generally the way the delegations currently are set is if it's an approved budget, then the staff can get on and spend it and don't need to come back for check-in. So we could, for projects like that, we can have a monitoring arrangement in place and we can come to you and seek a resolution, and you can make a call to increase debt, and then you would just have the flow-on consequences, funding consequences that would be caught up in the following year. So that's always a council call to make.
One quick follow-up. These are obviously large roading projects with large significant flow-on effects that need a long lead-in time for planning. That's the part I'm concerned about. I realise we can bring them forward, but there's the planning phase and the operational planning to get the infrastructure in place.
Yeah, I'm not across the detail of the specific projects, so that would be more like Andy Mead, but a lot of those growth projects actually are developer reimbursements. So because the developer are doing earthworks in their total subdivision generally, and we would enter into an agreement where they do the work and then we reimburse them for costs. And so our timing is linked to when they actually have completed the work, and we only pay on physical completion of the work to our satisfaction, approved by the staff that check the work, and then we pay the invoices. Yeah. So they're doing all the planning and they're doing all the construction, not us generally. We agree the specifications. Yeah. But Annie's across the detail of all of those.
So my question's following on from what you were talking about, Jen. If we don't consult, what does that do to a time frame? Does that take the pressure off? And I think it's really important that we actually do look at the specific projects amongst the group and actually have a bit of a chat. So if that helps us get to that and do a good job on that, I think it's worth looking at.
Yes, so at the timeframe had consultation closing at the end of May, and then we're moving into deliberations. So it gives you March, April. It probably gives you 2 months extra, depending on what type of engagement you might want to do and how you want to run that. But I would have thought it gives you at least a 6 to 8 week headroom, subject to the nature and extent of engagement that you want to do. That wouldn't be consultation.
So just in terms of the way we have categorised projects, I think the comment that Councillor Roseboom suggested is something we've talked about, where we would like to have an orange category, that we've around the table, people are saying it's a good idea, but there's actually no committed budget, but we'd be quite happy. But rather than those just come randomly at us from a pot that staff decide, that we can be a bit more, we can point to those as being, hey, these need to come forward. What are the opportunities to, even when we're talking about the spreadsheet that we're going to review over the next week, how do we start saying that's an orange, or that's a yes, we'd like that, but it would need to come back to council to be approved, and we can have a group of those twice a year that come back? Is that something your corporate planning system allows us to categorise those projects as?
Yes, so we have done this in the past, and you can continue to have a list that you approve through council. That is, we've called it a bring forward list, or
A watch list?
A bring forward list. So as
opposed to brought forward.
Yeah. So a list that you haven't actually budgeted in your 400 million, but if there's an opportunity of delay and a capacity, that you could say that's a priority project to be considered to be brought in, if that's what you're looking for.
It's just if we're doing the work around the table to say 7 of us like this one and 2 of us like this one, then let's not lose that when we get to this time in a year's time. We haven't spent. We've got some capacity. Let's know which projects they are, and it's something we've raised from the beginning, that which are the projects that have got shoved into next year 10 times, and again, so there's that comment, and then it's the group of 2 million that are safety projects. I'd quite like to know what they are, so we can know that yes, they are the ones that Councillor Crowther or Councillor Roseboom have been talking about, and yes, they are finally getting in, but we don't see that breakdown of those bundled good community projects. But back to my first one, so we have got a list of bring forwards. And does that sit somewhere that we can see?
No, I was saying you can choose to do that. So at the moment, the resolution is that future year projects can be brought forward, and there's currently a delegation to the CE to look at that where there's capacity, but that hasn't really been particularly actioned this year, but you can decide whether you want a general delegation or to be more specific to ensure that those priority projects are the ones looked at. That is a really helpful piece of information to guide our program management.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Given the events over at the Mount and subsequent to all the conversations that need to happen there, we may be, hopefully, wanting to get things underway, maybe in terms of design. Speaking prematurely here, but how do we fit that into the capital program for next year?
I've done a tiny bit of analysis of the capital projects in the Mount Maunganui area. They total roughly 5.6 of the total scope. We could choose to ring fence those for a more strategic conversation at a later date if we want to.
Yeah, I guess the other alternative is that we actually create a line item and include a nominal, a sum, an estimated sum of costs. I mean, it would be prudent. We know we are going to incur costs. It would be prudent to include a line item with a sum in there that is specifically for the purposes of recovery, remediation, whatever work might need to be done. It's not included at this stage, but I think that needs to be something that's discussed on Tuesday next week, and we need to do some work to try and refine what that number might be.
Thank you, Marty. And is there any ability to have a number that we might talk about for next week? Just as a contingency number?
We'll do our best,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
It would be quite a raw number, I think,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a raw topic. Just so I would like to suggest a 10-minute break and come back at 10:15.